Handa ka na bang magpabakuna? Narito ang mga paalala at hakbang na gagawin sa proseso ng pagbabakuna. Bago ang pagbabakuna, kinakailangan mo nang dumaan sa pre-vaccination screening. Kinakailangan kumuha muna ng medical clearance sa doktor ang mga kabilang sa special population tulad ng mga sumusunod. May autoimmune disease, may cancer, may HIV, sumasailalim sa transplant operation, kasalukuyang umiinom ng steroids, mga pasyenteng may taning na ang buhay dahil sa karamdaman o nakaratay na lang sa kama o bahay. Kapag ikaw ay nabigyan na ng medical clearance mula sa iyong doktor, narito ang mga dapat gawin bago ang araw ng iyong pagbabakuna. 1. Humingi ng schedule at lugar kung saan ka magpapabakuna sa iyong pinakamalapit na barangay health center. 2. Huwag kalimutan dali ng iyong government ID, proof of comorbidity o medical clearance, pati na ang face mask, face shield at hand sanitizer. Sa araw ng pagbabakuna, narito ang mga steps na dapat sundin. Step 1. Waiting area. Siguraduhin kayo ay pumunta sa tamang oras at petsa ng inyong schedule sa pagbabakuna. Hindi papayagan ang mga walk-in sa vaccination sites. Maupo sa bakanting upuan alinsunod sa tamang pagkakasunod na pilang. Hintayin na tawagin kayo para sa susunod na hakbang. Habang nag-aantay, sumunod sa minimum public health standards. Isuot ang face mask at face shield, sundin ang proper physical distancing at ugaliing maghugas at isanitize ang kamay. Step 2. Registration. Sundin ang mga patakaran ng inyong LGU o vaccination site sa pag-register at ipakita ang inyong government ID. Bibigyan kayo ng kopya ng informed consent form, health screening form at mga pamphlet tungkol sa bakuna na pwede ninyong basahin. Hintayin na matapos ang proseso ng registration bago pumunta sa susunod na hakbang. Step 3. Screening. Kayo ay isa sa ilalim sa health screening at tatanungin tungkol sa inyong kalusugan tulad ng history of COVID-19 exposure, history of vaccination, mga gamot na iniinom, kung may allergies at iba pa. Ito ay para makasiguro kung angkop para sa inyo ang magpabakuna sa kasalukuyan. Step 4. Health education. Makinig sa ibabahaging importanteng impormasyon tungkol sa pagbabakuna para sa COVID-19. Kung mayroon pa kayong ibang katanungan, sumangguni sa ating mga vaccination staff. Siguraduhin na pirmahan ang consent form na pumapayag kayong magpabakuna bago pumunta sa susunod na hakbang. Step 5. Vaccine Administration. Ito ang panahon kung saan kayo ay babakunahan sa loob ng 1 o 2 minuto. Huwag kalimutan na kunin ang inyong vaccination card pagkatapos matanggap ang bakuna. Step 6. Observation. Alinsunod sa Department of Health, ang lahat na magpapabakuna ay kailangan manatili sa pasilidad ng 15 hanggang 30 minuto para obserbahan kung may hindi magandang nararamdaman. Ang ating medical staff ay nakatutok sa inyo para ma-monitor ang inyong kalusugan. Bibigyan kayo ng mga pangalan ng health facility o hotline kung saan pwedeng pumunta kung kinakailangan sumangguni dahil sa side effects ng bakuna. Pagkatapos ng pagbabakuna, huwag kalimutang gawin ang mga sumusunod. 1. Itanong ang mga nais mong malaman tungkol sa vaccine na binigay sa'yo. 2. Huwag kalimutan ang iyong vaccination card. 3. Alamin ang petsa ng second dose ng iyong pagbabakuna. 4. Kunin ang contact number o alamin kung sino ang dapat tawagan kung sakali mang ikaw ay nakadarama ng seryosong side effects. Narito rin ang ibang mga paalala na dapat tandaan. Siguraduhin bumalik sa schedule para sa pangalawang dose ng bakuna. Laging tatandaan na kahit nabakunahan ka na, ay huwag pa rin kalimutan sumunod sa minimum public health standards tulad ng pagsasanitize ng mga kamay, pagsusuot ng face mask at face shield, at pagdistansya sa iba ng 1 metro. Magmask, hugas, iwas, airflow. Ito ay para na rin sa ating proteksyon at sa proteksyon ng iba. Narito ang pagkakasunod-sunod ng mga eligible population na target mabakunahan. Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, bisitahin ang mga sumusunod na pages. Facebook, Official DOH Gov. Twitter, @DOHGovPH. Website, doh.gov.ph. Tara na sa Bida Vacunation!
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented changes to our usual ways of living. But the Department of Education remains unfazed by these challenges to fulfill the mission of Sulong Edukalidad, the rallying call for national effort to deliver quality basic education to all Filipinos, which involve aggressive reforms in the 4 key areas. The K-12 curriculum review and update, improving the learning environment, teachers upskilling and reskilling, and engagement of stakeholders for support and collaboration to move forward together as we prepare the education system for the future. The call for Sulong Edukalidad will continue, and we have built the framework of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, or the BELCP, to put the needs of the learners at top priority. DepEd's BELCP is the major response and commitment to protect the health, safety, and well-being of learners, teachers, and personnel. The plan aims to provide opportunities to continue education even in these trying times with a BELCP in place, supported by an unprecedented number of diverse stakeholders from the academe, media, industry groups, NGOs, business and private individuals. Sulong Edukalidad will be able to sustain the aims in its reform for quality basic education. In our journey towards quality education, we have established the 4 pillars of aggressive reforms from the start, and we have been continuing to progress in these pillars. In improving the learning environment, we took action in the construction and rehabilitation of school buildings, ensured the availability of learning materials and equipment, and prioritized our last mile schools. The challenges of the pandemic also brought to light the urgent need to upgrade our ICT infrastructure to service the needs of education. In terms of the teachers upskilling and reskilling, we were able to establish more innovative professional standards for teachers and school heads. We have aligned the professional development of teachers with their career progression to track their development as part of the National Educators Academy of the Philippines transformation. With the launch of the Education Futures program, where we will be focusing on innovative actions and solutions to improve the state of our education, we are now more than ready to start a new journey and continue our fight for quality education for all Filipino learners. Finally, we've given high importance to the engagement of stakeholders for support and collaboration. In support of this, we have convened the Philippine Forum for Accessible Quality Basic Education, or the Education Forum, which will leverage other partnerships for education quality and strengthen partnership with the Philippine Normal University as the country's national center for teacher education. The department has also been developing a professional development program for teachers and school leaders in order to equip them with the skills, materials, and data that will allow them to help their students prepare for PISA 2022. This intervention consists of the following components: online training for teachers and school leaders, development of learning materials and practice tests for students, deepening the analysis of the PISA 2018 results, and supporting school-level action research. Now that the year is about to end, our commitment to Sulong Edukalidad will continue and will be far from being gone. With a lot at stake, considering our new knowledge and experience from this year's challenges, we are equipped to face a new future. As we head on to the future where we will face many challenges and uncertainties, the department will always be the guardian of every Filipino learner's right to education.
Sino ba ang hindi naapektuhan? Sino ba ang hindi nag-alala? Sino ba ang hindi nalito? Lahat tayo ay naapektuhan. Lahat tayo ay nag-aalala. Lahat tayo ay nalito. Dahil binago ng pandemyang dulot ng COVID-19 ang paraan ng pamumuhay ng lahat ng mga Pilipino saan mang sektor ka nabibilang. Tumigil ang panandalian ang ating mga nakagawian. Tumigil ang lahat ng uri ng transaksyon. Tumigil ang lahat ng operasyon ng mga paaralan. Nakalilito. Nakakaba. Paano na ang kinabukasan ng mga kabataan? Paano na tayo sa hinaharap? Opisyal na inilulunsad ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon sa pangunguna ng Office of the Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction ang DepEd Teaches. Ito ay isang online na programa na gagabay sa mga guro, tagapangasiwa, magulang at mag-aaral hinggil sa mga pagbabago sa batayang edukasyon ngayong new normal. Ang DepEd Teaches ay angkla sa sulong edukalidad na nakatuon sa apat na pangunahing pangangailangan ng mapunyaging reforma tungo sa makalidad na pagtuturo at pagkatuto. Una, pagre-review at pagsasapanahon ng kurikulum ng K-12. Ikalawa, pagpapaunlad ng kapaligirang pampagkatuto. Ikatlo, paglinang ng mga bagong kasanayan sa mga guro. At ang ikaapat, ang pakikipag-ugnay sa mga stakeholder para sa suporta at kolaborasyon. Sa pamamagitan ng virtual learning platform, ang DepEd Teaches ang magsisilbing bukas na komunidad ng pagsasanay na titipon sa mga guro, tagapamunong pang-edukasyon at sa sinumang may pagnanais sa pagtataguyod ng kalidad na edukasyon sa bansa at sa pagtagumpay ng bawat Pilipinong mag-aaral. Ang mga opisyal, education specialist, learning content expert at outstanding teacher ng DepEd ang magiging tagapanayam na magbabahagi ng kanilang kaalaman at kasanayan sa kurikulum, pagtuturo at pagkatuto, pagtataya at lahat ng kaugnay na mahalaga sa proseso ng pagtuturo at pagkatuto sa new normal. Bilang mga frontliner ng classroom, inaasahang magiging aktibo ang mga guro sa programang ito. Ang mga tema at paksa ay angkop sa kanilang pangangailangan at konteksto sa pamamagitan ng accessible na platform, ang social media. Sumali na sa OUCI family, sa DepEd Teaches, kung sama-sama mapahuhusay pa ang mga guro, kung sama-sama higit na malilinang natin ang mga mag-aaral.
Isang mapagpalang hapon sa ating lahat ng mga masugid na manonood ng DepEd Teaches. Muli na naman tayong nagkadaupang palad para sa isang mabungang gawain kasama ang ating mga taga-subaybay sa iba't ibang social media platforms tulad ng DepEd Philippines Facebook page, DepEd Tayo, at DepEd YouTube channel. Nagsimula tayo ngayong buwan ng Agosto ng isang bagong tema na Hindsight, Insight, and Foresight, Lessons and Ways Forward for the New Normal. Ito ang magbibigay sa atin ng kabuang pagkaunawa sa mga magiging hakbangin, plano at direksyon kaugnay sa kurikulum, instruksyonal na pagdidisenyo, pedagohiya, pagtataya, at mga kagamitang panlinang. Nakapaloob sa temang ito mula episode 31 to 38, ang mga paksang magsisilbing gabay sa iba't ibang sangay ng ating kagawaran mula sa mga paaralan, distrito, dibisyon at rehiyon kung papaano ilalapat at paghuhusayan pa ang mga umiiral na proyektong batay at angkla sa mga adhikaing isinusulong ng ating kagawaran. Kaya naman, malugod ko kayong inaanyayahan na patuloy kaming samahan dito sa DepEd Teaches para sa mga makabuluhang talakayan sa pangunguna ng mga dalubhasang tagapanayam at mahuhusay na tagapamahala ng kagawaran. At para sa hapong ito, ano naman kaya ang ating inaasahang matutuhan, Binibining Ana? Magandang hapon sa iyo.
Magandang hapon, Ginoong July. Gayon din sa lahat ng tumatangkilik ng DepEd Teaches. Ngayong araw, tayong lahat ay pinagpala sa panibagong pagkakataon ito para sa mahalagang talakayan kaugnay sa pedagohiya. Sa ating mga unang bahagi, nagtuon ang ating talakay sa iba't ibang learning delivery modalities. Ngayon naman, balikan natin ang ating mga kaalaman at karanasan pampagtuturo at pampagkatuto sa nagdaang taon ng pandemya at patuloy natin alamin kung paano pa ito mapaghuhusay at mapag-uunlad. Gayon din kung paano pa malilinang ang ating pamamaraan at mga estratehiya mula sa pagbibigay buhay sa curriculum hanggang sa pagdidisenyo ng mga makabago, mabisa at makabuluhang gawaing nagpapamalas ng malawak na pagsaalang-alang sa pangangailangan at sitwasyon ng ating mga mag-aaral sa kasalukuyan. Hindi naging madali para sa lahat ang nagdaang taon at patuloy pa tayong hinahamon sa kasalukuyan. Sa kabila nito, hindi tayo dapat magpatinag sa halip ay panatilihin ang pagtutulungan at pagsisikap sa pagkakaloob ng makalidad na edukasyong panlahat. Napapatotohanan na ito sa sabi nga ng isang pahayag, ang mabigat ay gumagaan kapag napagtutuwangan.
Sa makatuwid, Binibining Ana, kaakibat din nito ang masusing pagsangguni at pakikipag-ugnay sa bawat sangay pang edukasyon. Sa gayon, matitiyak na naipatutupad ng nararapat ang mga plano, gawain, programa at proyekto ng kagawaran sa ating mga paaralan. Samantala, hindi rin maikakaila ang ambag at suporta ng komunidad, lalo na ng ating mga magulang na katuwang natin sa pagtuturo gamit na rin ang weekly home learning plan at individual monitoring plan. Sa puntong ito, para mas maging komprehensibo pa ang ating talakayan, alamin natin kung ano ang mahalagang konsiderasyon kaugnay sa pagdidisenyong pampagtuturo at pampedagohiya bilang paghahanda sa nalalapit na pagbubukas ng klase ngayong Setyembre. Tama ba ako, Binibining Ana?
Tumpak ka dyan, Ginoong July. Kaya bago pa lumawig ang usapang ito hinggil sa hindsight, insight, and foresight, lessons and ways forward in learning delivery, magkakaroon muna tayo ng pamukaw siglang gawaing makawika at makakultura. Siyempre, bilang pakikiisa na rin sa pagdiriwang ng buwan ng wikang pambansa ngayong buong Agosto. Simulan na natin. Tayo ay maglalaro ng riddles o sa Filipino ay bugtong. Ang panuto ay hulaan ang tinutukoy sa bawat bugtong. Handa na ba kayo? Para sa unang bugtong, ito na ang magkakapatid, nag-uunahang pumanhi. Ano kaya ang tinutukoy ng bugtong ito? Heto na magkakapatid, nag-uunahang pumanhi. Meron kayong 30 segundo para hulaan ang tamang sagot. Ano kaya ang tamang sagot? Nakita ko sa ating comment section na may mga nakakuha ng tamang sagot. Atin ang ipakita. Heto na magkakapatid, nag-uunahang pumanhi. Ang tamang sagot ay paa. Ang paa ay mahalagang bahagi ng ating katawan na nagdadala sa ating nais na patutunguhan. Maaari ring sumimbolo ito sa ating paggawa at direksyon sa buhay. Kaya naman nararapat na ang ating mga paa ay ilakad sa paggawa ng mabuti sa matutuwid na mga bagay na makakatulong sa pagtupad ng ating mga pangarap sa buhay. At para sa susunod na katanungan, Ginoong July?
Ayan, napakagandang bugto nga iyan, Binibining Ana, ukol sa pagkilos at paggawa na sinisimbolo ng ating mga paa. Naway marami sa ating mga taga-subaybay nga ang nakakuha ng tamang kasagutan. Dumako naman tayo sa ating ikalawang bugtong. Atin itong ipakita. Balong malalim, puno ng patalim. Muli, balong malalim, puno ng patalim. Maaari na ninyong ilagay sa comment section ang inyong kasagutan sa bugtong na ito. Ayan, may mga nakita na rin akong tamang kasagutan sa ating comment section. So atin ang ipakita ang tamang sagot sa bugtong na ito. Balong malalim, puno ng patalim. Ang tamang sagot ay bibig. Ang bibig ay hindi lamang bahagi ng ating katawan na gamit sa pagkain. Ito rin ay daluyan ng iba't ibang ideya na maaaring mabuti o masama. Kaya dapat sinasanay natin ang ating mga bibig sa pagsasabi ng pawang mga katotohanan, matuwid at mabuti na kapupulutan ng magagandang aral.
Napakagandang bugtong. Kahit na ang balong malalim puno ng patalim, ang bibig din ay maaari at syempre magagamit para sa isang mabuti at magandang kaparaanan. Para naman sa ikatlong bugtong, atin ang ipakita. Dalawang batong itim, malayo ang nararating. Aking uulitin, dalawang batong itim, malayo ang nararating. Ano kaya ang tamang sagot? Atin nang alamin ang tamang sagot. Dalawang batong itim, malayo ang nararating. Ang tamang sagot ay mata. Napansin ko rin sa ating mga taga-subaybay, marami sa kanilang aktibong lumalahok sa maikling gawain ito. Ang ating mata ay hindi lamang para tayo makakita, kundi higit pa rito ang mapahalagahan, ang nakikita nating mabubuti sa ating paligid at may tuwid ang mga mali at hindi magandang ating nasisilayan. Nakakita tayo para rin maunawaan ang iba't ibang kalagayan sa ating lipunan. Sa gayon, makakapag-ambag tayo para sa mabuti at masupil ang hindi kaaya-aya.
Sang-ayon nga ako diyan, Binibining Ana. At sinasabi rin na ang ating mga mata ang bintana ng kaluluwa. Dahil dito nakikita kung tayo ay tapat at kung tayo ay nagsasabi ng ating kalooban. Ngayon naman, dumako na tayo sa ating panghuling bugtong. Atin ang ipakita. Kay lapit-lapit na sa mata, di mo pa rin makita. Muli, kay lapit-lapit na sa mata, hindi mo pa rin makita. Maaari na ninyong ilagay sa comment section ang inyong kasagutan sa huling bugtong na ito. Ayan, atin nang ipakita ang tamang sagot. Kay lapit-lapit na sa mata, di mo pa rin makita. Ang tamang sagot ay tainga o tenga. Ang ating mga tenga ay isa ring maituturing na pangunahing bahagi ng katawan. Mahalaga ito para sa ating pagkatuto at pagtuklas sa pamamagitan ng masusi at aktibong pakikinig ng mga samut-saring kaalamang tunay na magpapalago at magpapaunlad ng ating pagka-individual. Maraming salamat sa pakikilahok sa ating maikling gawaing ito. Kung inyong susuriin, ang ating mga bugtong ay may kinalaman sa mahalagang bahagi ng ating katawan. Nangangahulugang ito ang bawat bahagi ng ating katawan ay may mahalagang gampanin sa ating pamumuhay, lalong-lalo na sa ating pagkatuto. Gaya ng ating mga paa, tenga, bibig at mga mata na nararapat gamitin sa kapaki-pakinabang na gawain tulad ng aming laging paanyaya sa inyo dito sa DepEd Teaches, na sama-sama tayong matuto at maglapat ng mga natutuhan sa ating mga tungkulin bilang mabubuting bahagi ng kagawaran. At sa puntong ito, huwag na tayong magpatumpik-tumpik, Binibining Ana. Maaari na nating ipakilala ang ating mahusay na tagapanayam.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong July. Malugod naming ipinapakilala sa inyo ang ating tagapanayam ngayon sa hapong ito, ang pinakamahalagang bahagi ng DepEd Teaches. Ating kilalanin si Director Laila P. Ariola. Siya ay nakapagtapos sa kurso ng Doctor of Philosophy and Educational Management sa St. Paul University. Siya rin ay nakatanggap ng parangal hindi lamang isa kundi sa 3 pagkakataon noong 1997, 1991 at 2001 bilang Most Outstanding School Principal of Cagayan. Sa taong 2015, si Director Ariola ay naging OIC Schools Division Superintendent ng DepEd Division Cagayan hanggang sa siya ay naging Director 4 ng Kawanihan sa Linangan ng Pagkatuto sa punong tanggapan ng Kagawaran ng Edukasyon noong 2018.
Taglay din ni Director Leila Ariola ang mayamang karanasan sa larang ng edukasyon gaya ng pagiging mahusay na tagapanayam, tagapagsalita, propesora at manunulat. Nakilahok rin siya sa iba't ibang pagsasanay at pagpupulong dito sa ating bansa at sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo. Isang leader na may tunay na malasakit sa pagtamo sa layunin at adhikain ng kagawaran, pinunong angkin ang pusong nagniningas sa pagpapabuti at pagpapaunlad ng pamamaraang pampagtuturo at pampagkatuto. Atin ang tinatawagan para magbigay ng napapanahong kaalaman. Muli, aking ipinagkakaloob sa inyo ang Director 4 ng Bureau of Learning Delivery. Bigyan natin ng isang masigabong palakpakan si Director Leila P. Ariola.
Maraming salamat sa inyo, July at Ana, at isang mapagpalang hapon sa ating lahat. Thank you very much for making me part of today's episode of DepEd Teaches. So, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented changes and challenges to the global community and to the education system. It consistently rendered the face-to-face learning platform highly improbable for now. Face-to-face learning is not yet allowed by our beloved President. There is no other way to deliver learning if not through remote or distance learning, where our learners can still master the required learning competencies even within the confines of their homes. Inevitably, the pandemic has tested the readiness of our department. Despite the Herculean task that came along with the implementation of the distance learning delivery modalities, the Department of Education has remained steadfast in its mandate to continue with the delivery of basic education amidst these uncertainties. And it was indeed a very challenging and extraordinary school year. But we are so happy that we ended up victorious for our learners. And for this, we would like to congratulate our stakeholders, our officials from the Department of Education for making education continue. The outbreak of COVID-19 has been a challenge all over the world. And it remained, our schools actually remained closed as physical classes are not yet allowed. And the pandemic has brought about huge impact on the education of our school children, much more to our young children, the early grades, those who belong to the K-3 stage, and that of our learners with disabilities, who are considered to be most vulnerable learners to access education because they rely heavily on the guidance of adults or caregivers or learning facilitators, really very much affected. And we all know very well that we faced a number of challenges last school year. While we wanted to implement distance learning delivery modalities, we were challenged by a number of problems. One, of course, is on the availability of learning resources. How ready are our teachers in terms of facilitating the multiple learning delivery modalities? How ready are our principals to implement the menu of learning delivery modalities? And we also face challenges, particularly on some classes that would be calling for a hands-on activity. We were challenged of the availability of the internet. How ready are our parents in terms of facilitating learning, because the children are learning from home? While it is true that we included the TV and radio-based instruction as learning delivery modalities, our challenge was also the access of our school children to TV channels and radio stations, capacity also of our learners to undertake their tasks independently, given that they're learning from home. And of course, our concern was also on their social, emotional well-being. Our learners with disabilities were not spared also of the problem. They were very much affected, and on screen are a number of challenges that we also face, especially in the implementation of the special education. So just like our typical learners, our learners with disabilities got the same problems. But the Department of Education, with the Department of Education, we look forward at these challenges as opportunities actually to deliver education amidst this pandemic. So we all rallied behind our beloved Secretary, Professor Emeritus Leonor Magtolis Briones for education to continue. We strengthened the 4 pillars of the Sulong Edukalidad. And for the K in the KITE, we streamlined the most essential learning competencies. We made sure that that learning was never disrupted. And we also had to improve learning environment. We institutionalized the different learning delivery modalities. We employed new teaching learning platforms, and we provided a plethora of online and learning resources, especially for our learners to get into online distance learning. We made sure that our teachers are also capacitated. So we recalibrated the teacher training contents to align with the new pedagogical demands. We realigned pre-service trainings and on-the-job trainings with the new expectations in the teaching profession. And we also revisited the professional standards for teachers to respond to the different learning delivery modalities. May we have the next slide, please? Next slide. Okay. And that certainly DepEd cannot respond to all these challenges all alone. It has to engage stakeholders. And so we strengthened our partnership and linkages in the true spirit of unity and that of Bayanihan. So all these opportunities were concretized into plans of action, and living up to its commitment of ensuring educational continuity, the Department of Education developed the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, which offers the education interventions that respond to the basic education challenges brought about by COVID-19. The Learning Continuity Plan streamlines the basic or the K-12 curriculum into the most essential learning competencies, and these are delivered through the multiple learning delivery modalities. And there was indeed a need to transform the learning delivery landscape from the usual face-to-face learning to remote learning. And so the transition to distance learning has created actually unprecedented challenges in learning delivery. And responding to this and recognizing the diversity of situations, the Department of Education actually created various educational technologies and platforms to support distance learning so that options are available to all learners, to all families, and that of communities. We have the DepEd Commons, we have our own DepEd learning management system, we made use of the Google Classroom, we have the Microsoft Teams, we have the DepEd TV YouTube, we have the DepEd TV Facebook, to name a few. But of course, we have to remember that it's the self-learning module that serves as the primary learning resource for distance learning. And all these are being converted to different content formats. On screen is a very strong statement of our secretary. And this is an assertion of our beloved secretary, if only to stress and ensure that learning or education must continue. And may I read the lines of our beloved secretary. We have come out with a variety, with a menu of options. Online is not the only answer. There's a huge debate in the Philippines on how useful or whether it is really a good way of teaching learners. So we have online, we have televisions, we have the radio. If all else fails, then learning modules are being printed so that this will be delivered in various pickup points, or either parents or for the village officials to distribute to the learners. So that's really a very strong statement, if only to communicate to us that we are really wanting for education to continue. In distance learning, learning primarily happens at home. It's purely at home. It can be modular, it can be online, it can be through the use of TV or radio-based instruction. And everything is dependent on the available resources that our families have for their school children. And as I have mentioned earlier, it's the SLM, that's the self-learning module that's considered as the primary learning resource. And it's delivered to the learners in their respective homes through the assistance of our stakeholders, or parents may go to the school or wherever is the pickup point. But of course, we always ensured that the health and physical distancing protocols were observed. And in the choice of the learning delivery modalities, the parents were also given the option to choose what is best, what they think is best and beneficial for their respective children. So the Department of Education conducted actually a survey to look into the preferred learning delivery modalities of learners, to ensure equity in the distribution of resources, and that all learners, regardless of gadgets, access to gadgets, or internet connection shall enjoy the same quality of education in the new normal. And this is indeed to ensure that no one is left behind. So that the data that we were able to gather in this survey served as feedback data in the prioritization of resource allocation. And the next slide is going to show us actually our actual enrollment per learning delivery modality. And you will note that 79% of our learners from the more than 26 million learners got into modular print. And we, as much as possible, for the coming school year, would like to decrease actually our reliance to modular learning, especially for print, to be more environment friendly. So as I have mentioned earlier, it's the self-learning module that serves as the primary learning resource. And what we're doing now in the Department of Education is to revisit all these self-learning modules and make the necessary enhancements ready for the next school year. And these self-learning modules are being converted to different content formats. We have the inclusive ESLMs, and called it inclusive because we wanted to respond to the requirements also of our learners with disabilities. Video and audio lessons. For video and audio lessons, we have included the sign language interpretation. And all these materials are made available online and offline. And these are all uploaded in our learning resources portals. So you can visit the DepEd Commons. We have also our own DepEd learning management system, and the ICTS in collaboration with the CI Strand is continuously improving and enhancing our DepEd LMS ready for the next school year. In fact, we have a scheduled training already on the utilization of LMS for the coming school year. And even in our learning resource portal, our materials, especially those that are quality assured materials, are made available. So that you will note that these are the printed learning materials. These are in digital format. In fact, even for the TV episodes, were converted to MP4 format, so that even those who do not have any TV access can still benefit from all these materials. So we face a number of challenges last school year, and of course we had a lot of responses also, not only at the central office but also in regional offices. And so there were a number of issuances that were issued in order for our schools to be guided on the implementation of the distance learning delivery. We even for the age qualification of our kindergarten pupils and grade 1 pupils are we also issued a policy guideline on that, and the ECD assessment checklist was also made flexible. In fact, we had to translate that to Filipino so that parents who help us administer will certainly be able to do it. The Department of Education, because we know very well that not all our learners can manage their own learning, so we hired learning support aides in order for us to be able to help parents who are not able to, who do not have the capacity to teach their own children. And we also noted, we receive a lot of reports that our children and even parents find so much difficulty accomplishing the activities that were provided to the school children. And so we came out with an issuance, particularly entitled Suggested Measures to Foster Academic Ease, if only to reduce the stress and anxiety of our learners, especially with the activities that are given them. So they claim that they are overwhelmed. So we have this issuance, particularly fostering academic ease. In this particular issuance, we also emphasize the need for physical fitness and wellness. So here we are motivating families and households for regular and daily exercises. And that's not only for our learners, but also for our teachers as well. Even our assessment and grading was, for assessment and grading, we had to issue our interim guidelines for assessment in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. So with all the concerns on validity and reliability on assessment in the light of the pandemic, we issued DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, or entitled the Interim Policy in Assessing and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. And everyone knows so well that for now we suspended the conduct of the periodic tests, and for summative tests, it's actually limited to a minimum of 4 written works and 4 performance tasks. Minimum lang po yun, ha. So ibig sabihin, there could be more than 4. Everything is dependent on the plans of our teachers. So the new grading system has also emphasized the value of formative assessments, which is beneficial for our children in their transition to become independent learners. The next slide is going to show us that the Department of Education also was very responsive to some of the reports. There were not noted errors in our SLMs, and we were able to address them immediately. But I'd like to mention that from the thousands of SLMs, self-learning modules reviewed by the central office, we have 25 reported errors. And so the diverse culture of the country has been creating concerns on embracing social context in SLMs and that of other learning resources. And for us to be able to respond to the challenge, we have launched Error Watch to harvest these gaps and address them. We actually issued errata immediately. And there's a technical working group that is working on this. And the technical working group, in fact, is being headed by the Bureau for this particular purpose. The well-being of our learners is also a concern for all of us. And you will note on screen that the Department of Education provided psychosocial support to our learners, and we ensured that no one is left behind. So the department, through the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Service, actually conducted a lot of activities, and that includes the OKKK Tambayan. It's online kahusayan at katatagan ng kabataang tambayan. We also have the Datala, and then there's the Kakaiba Yanihan, and the Kakaiba Yanihan is intended for our learners with disabilities. And I'd like also to mention that we are working with a number of partners, non-government organizations like Save the Children, UNICEF, where we have also contextualized the Index of Inclusion, which is a guide for inclusive school development, and many other activities just to ensure that we're able to respond to the requirements of our learners with disabilities while they're learning from home. It was never an easy year for all of us, given that there was a shift, particularly on who is going to be working with the teacher, particularly on facilitating learning. In the face-to-face classes, it would always be the teacher who's on top, but while our learners are learning from home, then certainly it's the parents who takes the role actually of being the learning facilitator. And for us to be able to help them, the Bureau of Learning Delivery, under the curriculum and instruction strand, crafted the Parents Handbook for the New Normal in Basic Education. In this handbook, there's a discussion on the different learning delivery modalities, on the learning resources that can be used to deliver instruction, on how materials can be blended or combined for blended distance learning delivery modality. And it enumerated, among others, the roles of parents, particularly on how is it to be a learning facilitator. We made use of the acronym PARENT. So I hope that through this, deputy teachers will be able to share this parents handbook for the new normal in basic education. And this is intended for parents and that of our learning facilitators, where we expect our parents to provide the child with enough time for learning support and guidance, where they need to advise their children of their routine, where their parents need to remind their children of their learning tasks and remind him about the time frame, where the parents are also engaged in guiding their kids in their respective work, where parents are expected also to nurture their kids and make sure that their well-being is being ensured, that they have to be the very first people who should believe in their kids, that their children can be independent learners. And of course, we always expect our parents to be of support to their children in whatever tasks they do. So we actually have this handbook, so we can share you this handbook. And I'd like to, I'm so proud also to share you, and these are all gathered from our program implementation review activities with our regional offices. And our regional offices, they're on respective initiatives, interventions in order for them to be able to address the many challenges brought about by this pandemic in the lives of our school children while they're learning from home. And I'm so happy that our regions focus on the development of the K-3 fundamental skills, and for them to be able to provide remediation, intervention. Imagine nyo, meron pang tinatawag na tutorial on wheels. So these are all initiatives. And there's also such a thing as a mobile technical vocational and livelihood laboratory. And I hope that all our regions, our divisions, and schools will be able to have this, if only to be able to respond to the needs also of our learners who are in TVL and even in science, where hands-on activities are need to be implemented. So sana may karoon ito ng multiplier effect. So and many other interventions. So meron silang tinatawag na division call center. So meron silang mga help desk. They did a lot of training our parents on how is it to be facilitating learning. Actually, we also have a lot of schools that have their own radio stations. Meron din yung kanya-kanyang mga TV stations, local TV stations, and they develop their own materials even. One among the noted interventions provided also by our teachers is also the conduct of home visitation, and in that home visitation is there where they get to provide assistance, instructional support to our learners where it's allowed actually. And what's making us successful also in all this intervention is the strengthened partnership that we have with our stakeholders, especially with our barangay officials, our municipal officials, to continue to support us. I'm just so happy that we have regions that endeavored actually to prepare instructional videos to help our learners understand better their lessons. And many other, we actually have a number. My 30 minutes slot may not even be enough to share you all these initiatives and best practices of our divisions, of our regions, and that of our schools. So what's up beyond COVID-19 in learning delivery? I'd like to say that the Bureau of Learning Delivery is actually mandated to develop and manage the National Education Policy Framework on Learning Management and Delivery. And so with this pandemic, we see the need to change the learning delivery landscape in support of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan in light of the COVID-19. And so we have here, we drafted this teaching and learning delivery framework. And you will note that all elements in the framework are critical to ensure the 21st century readiness of every learner. And armed with this knowledge, the teachers should be open to adjust and be committed with what the 21st century education demands. So school leaders should also be dedicated and supportive to the needs of the teachers so that the latter are more confident in teaching their lessons, applying the appropriate and relevant pedagogies. And you will note that it's not just face-to-face learning that's included here. So the different learning delivery modalities, the distance learning delivery modalities, the subcategories of distance learning are already included here. So we have the modular learning, we have online distance learning, we have TV and radio based. And eventually when face-to-face learning is going to be allowed, then certainly we'll be implementing blended learning. And of course, we do not get away from the implementation of alternative delivery modes, especially for learners who are at risk of dropping out. But certainly, this learning delivery modalities will be implemented, especially for those that require face-to-face, will only be implemented when we will already be allowed. But post-COVID, certainly we'll be coming up with policy guidelines in order for us to set who should be into online learning, who should be into modular learning, and who should be into blended distance learning. The slide is showing you this is actually the framework of that blended learning that we prepared in the event that face-to-face classes will already be allowed. So this is a framework that's going to cover limited face-to-face. So we're ready in the event that face-to-face learning is going to be allowed. But for now, next slide, please. But for now, we have to implement just the same, the blended distance learning. So the swift shift to distance learning shall I say, it's powerful and it's a laudable start. But our experiences over the past school year taught us actually a lot of lessons for improvement and many lessons for life. Because the utmost consideration of our government, our department, especially our beloved Secretary Leonor Magtolis-Briones, is the health, safety, and well-being of our learners, our teachers, our non-teaching personnel, and also our stakeholders, and that includes our parents, who continue to work with us to support us. So we are still going to implement the distance learning delivery modality for school year 2021-2022, while the face-to-face learning is not yet allowed. But while we implement practically the same distance learning, the same modalities under the same subcategories of distance learning as the previous school year, it cannot be business as usual, my dear school heads and my dear teachers. We need to revisit our responses implemented. Yes, there have been a number of innovative initiatives and promising practices as reported by our regional offices, by our SDOs, by our schools, and during the PIRs. And all these are actually commendable. The primary challenge we faced last school year was the need to respond to the requirements of distance learning in terms of learning resources and education technologies. We developed, we produced, we distributed, and we retrieved We converted the self-learning modules to different content formats. We capacitated our teachers in the implementation of the multiple learning delivery modalities, including parents. So hindi natin pinag-iwanan ang ating mga magulang para ihanda sila para magiging learning facilitators then, because with home-based learning, then they take the lead role of facilitating learning. And we intensified actually partnerships and linkages with stakeholders, because as I have mentioned earlier, we need a lot of support from our stakeholders. The regional offices are instructed to enhance the implementation of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, which includes maximizing the use of the DepEd TV, the radio-based instruction to reduce reliance on printed modules. We need to re-envision learning with technology. So kung pwede lang po, ang gagawin po natin this coming school year ay i-reduce natin yung dependence natin sa printed self-learning modules, and where possible, at kung meron pong mga gadgets, mga devices ng ating mga bata, ay gumamit po ng online distance learning or modular digital. At let's maximize the use of DepEd TV and radio-based instruction. As I have mentioned earlier, kung wala po kayong access sa DepEd TV at ganoon din sa mga radio stations, ang ICPS, ang ginawa po nila ay kinonvert po nila yung mga TV episodes, ganoon din yung mga radio episodes natin, radio lessons natin, to MP4 format, para sa ganon ang mga ito ay pwedeng gamitin ng mga mag-aaral natin na kahit wala po silang internet connection at basta meron silang television sa bahay, meron silang video players, ay pwede pong gamitin ito. At ang maganda nito, pwedeng ulit-ulitin ng ating mga bata na panoorin yung mga video episodes na to, mga pakinggan yung mga audio lessons na to, para mas lalo po nilang maintindihan ang kanilang mga lessons. So, kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina, our focus last year was the provision of a number of learning resources to our learners. This time, ibahin po natin ang ating mga, kumbaga, dahil meron naman na tayong mga learning resources, kung meron mang pagkukulang, konti na lang po. So this time, let's try to focus our attention, our attention focusing on addressing learning loss, keeping the children in school, at syempre ensuring the well-being, the health and well-being of our learners. So ito po yung focus natin ngayong year na to, para mas lalong mapag-igihan natin ang delivery of learning this coming school year. And syempre, we remind our teachers to be more religious in the preparation of the weekly home learning plan, because the weekly home learning plan will certainly help our learning facilitators, especially our parents, to be able to guide their children. So to our parents, to our learning facilitators, it's important to make yourself familiar with the contents and format of the SLM. So kinakailangan maibigay po sa inyo ahead of time itong mga SLMs na to para makita din ninyo. The the weekly learning plan will also be provided to you, as it ensures that the learner can finish the assigned task for the specific week. And ang maganda kasi dito sa weekly home learning plan, pag maibigay talaga ito sa mga magulang, guided po ang mga magulang natin, guided din po ang mga bata natin. At wala na po siguradong wala na pong magrereklamo, napagod na po sila. Because if you're going to follow strictly actually the weekly home learning plan that's provided you will note that it provides yung time for our children to rest, to relax, time for them to enjoy just the same their hobbies, time for them to do physical exercise. You can do family bonding even, and syempre hindi natin kakalimutan na yung mga household chores ng ating mga bata, pwede pa rin nilang magawa kung sundin natin talaga itong weekly home learning plan na ginawa ng ating mga teachers. So yung weekly home learning plan kasi natin, kasama niya po dito yung mga targeted competencies na kinakailangan gawin ng week na yan. Ano ba yung mga daily tasks ng ating mga bata na kinakailangan gagawin, pati yung time allotment in doing the task, kasama din po yan. Pati yung mode of submission, kung kailan isubmit yung mga requirements, yung mga outputs ng mga bata ay nakalagay din doon. Pati yung oras, kung yung panahon na pwedeng makonsulta ang mga teachers pa natin, mga mahal namin mga magulang, ay kasama din po dyan sa ating weekly home learning plan and reminders of the daily routines, breaks, and other task activities of our learners. So, napaka-importante po itong weekly home learning plan na to. That's why before the start of the school year, we are conducting actually an enhancement activity, particularly on the preparation of that weekly home learning plan para mas lalong matulungan natin ang mga teachers po natin. And I repeat actually my appeal for our teachers to be religious in the preparation of the weekly home learning plan kasi ito po yung mag-guide po sa ating mga anak. And there's another important tool that our teachers need to prepare. It's the individual monitoring plan. Kasi itong individual monitoring plan kasi when it's being properly and religiously accomplished, it tells a story of how our children have progress. It tells us also what needs the areas of improvement, saan kinakailangan tulungan ang ating mga anak. At napaka-importante na itong individual monitoring plan na to should also be communicated to parents. It should be also communicated to the learners para lahat alam nila kung saan sila nakatayo at alam nila kung saan dapat sila matutulungan. And there's another very important tool that's included in DepEd Order number 31 series of 2020, yung interim guidelines natin on assessment. At ito ay para sa mga learners, para sa mga magulang, at ganun din sa ating mga learners. At hinihingi po natin, kahit sinabi po natin na hindi po mandatory ito, sana makita ng ating mga magulang, ang ating mga mag-aaral at ating mga teachers ang importansya nito. And so that's why we're saying that this is highly recommended to be accomplished to keep track of the academic progress of our learners. So ano itong self-monitoring tool na to? This is a tool that our teachers can use to both record evidences of learning and give feedback to the learners and that of the parents. So makikita nyo na maganda itong i-consolidate. So mga mag-aaral po natin, kinakailangan i-accomplish po natin ito. Kasi ito, tinatanong niya kung ano yung mga asignatura na pinag-aralan mo sa araw na yon. Kumusta naman ang yung pag-aaral? Alin dito ang madali? Saan ka nahirapan? So ano pa yung gusto mong itanong sa yung mga guro? So ibig sabihin, pag na-communicate natin din ito sa mga parents, na ibigay natin ito sa mga parents, ito din yung basehan ng ating mga teachers para iplano kung paano kayo tulungan, para iplano kung ano pang mga activities na kailangan nilang ibigay. Kasi nakita nila na, for example, may mga bata na nakatapos na sa mga given activities, so alam nila na kinakailangan palang bigyan kayo ng mga enrichment activities. So lahat ng mga ito po ay napaka-importanteng mga tools para lahat tayo ay matulungan natin ang bawat isa para mapaigi natin ang pag-aaral ng ating mga anak. So, ang dami nating mga gains ang dami na nating mga initiatives, innovative initiatives. Ang dami na nating mga magagandang practices. And there's really a need for us to sustain and build on these gains in order for us to be able to at least address yung concern at respond to the learning loss na sinasabi dahil ang mga bata ay wala sila sa eskwelahan. So ang mga ito ay mga maaari pang gawin ng ating mga teachers na dapat makipagtulungan sila with sa mga parents natin, sa mga stakeholders natin, sa mga learning facilitators, at lahat ng mga stakeholders natin who are very much willing to offer instructional support to our learners, and one among which is, of course, the provision of supplementary materials and activities to our learners. So we are expecting that our teachers shall provide additional activities and materials, and these activities and materials need to be engaging, they need to be authentic, integrative, and they need to be appropriate and meaningful for our learners. And we expect that dahil naman lahat ng mga bata natin ay may mga kumbaga may mga devices, may mga technologies sila, so pwede din silang magbigay ng mga activities that's going to employ low technologies para sa mga bata na walang access sa internet. So kinakailangan ilagay nyo din sa puso nyo yon, dahil hindi lahat ng mga bata ay merong silang internet connection. So you may provide video lessons that sufficiently explain the concepts identified, especially for those concepts which our children find difficulty. At I mentioned earlier about yung explainer video, and they call it Teach All Children Explainer Video. Ito po ay a project ito ng Region 1, and we're just so happy na you were able to come up with this project, and I hope that other regions will come to adopt this particular strategy to help our learners. We also have to intensify also yung mechanisms natin to follow up our learners, and here we need to strengthen, intensify yung conduct of regular home visitations and follow-ups, because it's not a problem for those who have internet connectivity. Ang problema natin yung mga bata talaga na no access sa internet, at ang paraan lang ay talagang home visitation, or pwede naman phone calls, pwede naman text messages. At maganda siguro na ibalik natin yung text-to-teach na programa din natin noon, para mas lalong makatulong tayo sa ating mga anak. Pwede tayong makapagbigay ng remediation, pwede tayong makapagbigay actually ng intervention activities gamit pa rin ng kung kahit wala po tayong internet connectivity, pwede pa rin natin gamitin ang mga phones natin, pwedeng tumawag, pwedeng mag-text para lang makatulong sa ating mga bata. So as sana when we conduct home visitations and follow-ups, isingit na rin natin yung pwedeng paraan na makapagbigay tayo ng remedial sessions kung kinakailangan po na for example, andun kayo at observe ang physical distancing, pwede bang namang tumulong na kahit 1 meter apart kayo or 2 meters apart, okay lang po yon. Basta importante ay matulungan din natin ang mga anak natin. We're also recommending yung establishment ng virtual study groups and body session para ang mga bata natin ay matulungan nila ang bawat isa, lalong-lalo na for those with internet connectivity. So malaking tulong po sa ating mga anak ito. And of course, we appeal that our parents need to be involved all the more. We are just so happy that we have the teacher volunteers who are always there willing to help our learners and provide intervention. At sana we're able to intensify po ito if all schools all throughout the Philippines will have this, and certainly yung learning loss na meron na pinag-usapan ngayon ay mababawasan po ito. And the last but not the least is the improvement of literacy at home, especially for our K-3 learners. This is intended actually for our K-3 learners. And so we appeal to our K-3 teachers, our parents and guardians to plan together on improving the learners' reading literacy and mathematical literacy. So sana maibalik natin yung kagaya ng panahon ko na meron pa ring storytelling na nangyayari bago matulog. Sana iulit po natin ang mga to. And certainly when we get into this, we ensure the Department of Education that parents will be oriented on their roles they have to play and the advantages of home-based learning setup to bring their children and families together at para matulungan ang bawat isa. So, marami pa po na pwedeng gawin, and we appeal to our teachers, our school officials, to continue rethinking, to continue thinking about what would be best for our learners para matulungan natin sila while they are learning from home. Sana nga lang po may face-to-face learning na para at least makatulong tayo sa ating mga anak. So with the basic education learning continuity plan and the show of support of both internal and external stakeholders, DepEd is confident that it will remain its commitment to deliver quality, accessible, inclusive, and relevant educational programs amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Our mission actually is to overcome the learning crisis brought about by this pandemic, and this health crisis continue to pose significant challenges in learning delivery. It continues to, while it poses a number of challenges, it continues to offer us also valuable lessons on the real priorities in education as well as in life. The challenges, the opportunities, the lessons communicate to us that we continue to rethink, we continue to reimagine how best we could deliver education so that no one is left behind. The challenge today is to reduce as much as possible the negative impact of this pandemic is bringing on learning and that of schooling, and build on this experience to get back on a path of faster improvement in learning. We continue thinking on how we can recover stronger. Kagaya ng sabi nila, kailangan we have to build back better, and with a renewed sense of responsibility of all stakeholders, and with a better understanding and sense of urgency of the need to close the gap in opportunities and assuring that all children have the same chances for quality education. Kahit anong learning delivery modality, yan po ang gusto natin ensure. And it certainly takes the whole school community to build back better. So admittedly, COVID-19 is a life-changing event, but we will never allow it to kill the dreams of our learners. With that, I say, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po, Director Ariola, sa isang mahusay, malinaw at komprehensibong panayam. Tunay na babaunin namin ang mga kaalamang ibinahagi ninyo sa panibagong taon ng panuruang ito na aming susuungin. Napakahalaga po ng inyong pagbabahagi bilang paghahanda sa mga posible pang hamon na naghihintay sa mga alagad ng edukasyon. Salamat po sa pagkakataong ito na mapagnilayan ang mga pamamaraan pang pagtuturo at matutukan matuklasan ang aming kalakasan at kahinaan bilang batayan ng pagpapabuti at pagpapahusay pa sa paglalapat ng mga pedagohiya, estratehiya sa sitwasyong ito ng bagong karaniwan. Muli po, ikinagagalak namin kayo na maging kabahagi sa pangalawang pagkakataon ng DepEd Teaches bilang mahusay na tagapanayam, at maraming salamat sa pagpapamalas ng inyong kahusayan sa pagbabahagi po ng inyong kaalaman, Direktor Ariola. Para naman sa ating mga taga-subaybay, patuloy lamang po tayo na magbahagi ng mga natamong kabatiran at kaalaman sa araw na ito sa inyong personal Facebook page o di kaya sa inyong Twitter account. Gamitin lamang ang hashtag I support DepEd Teaches at hashtag DepEd Teaches episode 32.
At dahil tayo ay nagbukas ng bagong tema simula noong nakaraang linggo, tayo ay nangangailangan magparehistro. Makikita sa ating screen ang link. Isang beses lamang po tayo magtatala para sa buwan ng Agosto na sasakop na sa 4 na episodes na nakapaloob para sa ating tema. Huwag kalimutan ang mga natamong kabatirang ibinahagi sa atin ng ating mga tagapanayam upang maipasa natin ang pagtataya na ibibigay sa huling linggo ng buwan na ito. Inaasahan namin ang inyong patuloy na pagtangkilik at pagsuporta sa mga napakagandang talakayan dito lamang sa DepEd Teaches.
Sa ngalan ng Curriculum and Instruction Strand, sama-sama tayo sa pagkakaloob ng makalidad na edukasyong panglahat tungo sa pagtatamo ng mithiing pambansang karunungan at kaunlaran. Maraming salamat at naway magkita tayong muli sa susunod na Huwebes dito lamang sa DepEd Teaches. Isang magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.